Elise here at Bowman Library with a whole new middle grade book spotlight. So for this week, we are taking a look at one of my favorite types of books to read. We are talking about nonfiction. If you've watched enough of these over the months, over the weeks, you know I love nonfiction. And I think nonfiction sometimes gets this really bad rap that it's boring because you're learning or whatever. No, nonfiction doesn't have to be boring. And in fact, the 6 books we're going to take a look at, I can guarantee are not boring. In fact, some of them are some of my new favorites. So let's get started. This one is one of my new favorites. I will tell you this, I could not put this one down. This is Race to the Bottom of the Earth. So this is told in parallel chapters. So there's 6 parts, 2 chapters in each. And the reason why it does that is it explores 2 different races revolving around Antarctica. One of the races is all the way back in 1911, and it's the race to be the first person to the South Pole. The second race is 2018, and it's the race to be the first individual, solo to finish across the whole continent. So what it does is it looks at both of these races in 6 parts, and it tells each race in those chapters. So you kind of get to compare as each one goes. So this book takes a look at the preparation and the training which went into both races, as well as the equipment which was available and used. And then you dive into the actual adventure and journeys that the individuals faced, complete with some people not making it at all. And this is like they faced, there's the weather, there's supply issues, there's physical and mental hardships, and it was an amazing read. You will be turning the pages as fast as you can because you want to know what happens to all of these. You must want to know who wins the race, for lack of a better word. And it is amazing to read them side by side because even though it's 100 years apart, they're on the same continent. And the things that everyone had to go through, they don't change because the continent didn't change with the obstacles that it presented. I loved this true life, adventure thrilling story. You will too. I can promise you, you will not be disappointed. This is Race to the Bottom of the Earth. Chasing King's Killer. So, a while ago, we talked about Chasing Lincoln's Killer, which is amazing. This one is no exception. By the same author, James L. Swanson, this is all about Martin Luther King Jr., James Earl Ray, and that fateful day when their paths collide with the assassination of the famous civil rights leader, and then the ensuing manhunt which took place to catch the individual responsible. You will read about each of their lives and that build up to that day in 1968 when history changes. The hows and the whys to plot design, and then how James Earl Ray thinks he's gonna get away, and you read about pieces that you never knew about each man. Again, I think we all know that, we all know who Martin Luther King Jr. was, we know what he did, some of his famous things, we know he was assassinated, but this book dives into the before, during, and after in such a way that we aren't taught in history class, but we deserve to know, and Swanson does an amazing job at presenting that information. So this is Chasing King's Killer. Torpedo. Okay, so I will tell you this one is not for the faint of heart. Even though there are some good endings in here, there's not some good endings as well. So it's 1940 England, and World War II is in full force. Germany has England in its sight, and it's leading to these horrific and monstrous bombing attacks. So many parents at this time decide that in order to keep their children safe and out of harm's way, especially if they're in the cities like London, they want to send them away. So many end up going to the countryside and living with someone like the kids in the Narnia books do. But believe it or not, there were quite a few children that they were placed on ships, and then they were sent to Canada. So it's September 13, 1940, and the SS City of Bernays, which is this ship, it's leaving the port of Liverpool with 100 children on board, making it their way to Canada. Fast forward a couple days to September 17th, and then a German U-boat commander comes across this ship. And he does what he thinks he's supposed to, and he orders this ship to be torpedoed. not knowing that it is full of children and their chaperones trying to just get to safety. When one of the torpedoes hits the boat, that is when the rush to survival starts. This is told in chronological order. You'll be immersed in this piece of history, wanting to know what happens and needing to know who survives and how they survive and what happens to everyone, including the German U-boat commander. So this is told through eyewitness accounts as well as primary sources from the time. You'll be wanting to know as much as you can about this tragic event which took place, but no one really talks about it or even knows about, and it deserves to be told. This is Torpedoed. Enemy child. So in this biography, we meet Norman Mineta, who was forced to move to an internment camp during World War II, being that his parents were immigrants from Japan and he was Japanese American. And he and his family eventually make their way from the West Coast in California to this place called the Heart Mountain Camp in Wyoming. And here he shares his story of what it was like to live in this camp just because of how he looked and where his parents were from. So even though he was allowed to play baseball and be in the Boy Scouts, he was still trapped behind these barbed wire fences. And there were these soldiers with machine guns making sure everyone stayed in and no one tried to leave. When eventually he gets released, he decides that he's going to use his experiences in this camp to make a difference for others. Norman eventually becomes a 10-term member of the House of Representatives and serves on 2 separate cabinets for 2 different presidents. And because of all of this in his time in Congress, he was then able to introduce the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, and it became law. And what was one of the pressing things on here that he wanted so badly was it included a formal apology from the government for their actions for these internment camps, plus it offered restitution to individuals. So restitution is money that is owed back to individuals for something that's done to them. This biography is eye-opening and will place you in the shoes of another person and will leave you wondering, like me, and question how could we do this to other Americans? But you know, after you read about Norman's life and how he used it to help experience others, it will also inspire you to think about ways that you can help others as well. This is Enemy Child. Terrible Typhoid Mary by Susan Campbell Bartolletti. I love Susan Campbell Bartolletti. She has done some amazing ones. This is no exception. So you may have heard of the term Typhoid Mary before. You know, it's usually the term that someone uses when someone's sick and then they get everyone else sick and, you know, that's Typhoid Mary. Well, believe it or not, she was a real person. And this book is all about her and where that term came from. So let's go back in time. It's early 1900s. There's this young lady whose name is Mary Mallon. She's an Irish immigrant, and she gets this job as a cook for a wealthy family. So they go off to their summer house, and while they're at this summer house, the whole family starts to become sick with what eventually has become known as typhoid. And no one knows how this got started, so like they bring in this typhoid expert, and he starts tracking down like maybe where they got this from or how they caught it. And that is when Mary's life changes forever, because this typhoid expert discovers that Mary's a little different. Mary is this healthy carrier of typhoid, meaning that she has no symptoms, but she can spread it to others. This then leads to this look at history of how diseases were handled and how Mary's life becomes a piece in this game, but she's not going to play by any rules except her own. So this look at the life of a real person who is mentioned even today is one that is completely eye-opening. You will be asking yourself so many questions, and it's even more relevant today given what is going on in our current environment and disease and viruses, and I highly recommend this one. This is Terrible Typhoid Mary. And our last one for today is bringing back the wolves. So in the 1800s, people were encouraged to go to Yellowstone National Park and to hunt for wolves because these animals were a threat to the livestock, especially cattle that were kind of taking over the area. The issue or the problem then was once all the wolves were gone, things started to change in the park and not in good terms of the ecosystem. Some animals became overcrowded. Like they got to the point where there were so many elk, there were 20,000 elk in the park that there was no space for any other animal. And then some plants started to die because either the animals weren't there to like spread what needed to be spread, or they were being crushed by the weight of these algae, they were being eaten too much. And yeah, so like animals started disappearing, plants started disappearing, the whole ecosystem completely changed. Fast forward 90 years, 1995, a group of scientists and park rangers then came up with this idea. They wanted to reintroduce wolves back into Yellowstone National Park. So with the hope that everything would get back to normal and under control. So they bring 41 wolves, they place them in Yellowstone National Park, and then they kind of sit back and let's see what happens. Let's see what nature can figure itself out for. And the results are nothing short of amazing. If you love science, ecosystems, animals, being outside, this book is a must read. You will learn tons about ecosystems as well as what happened in this real scenario. This actually happened. So I encourage you to pick this one up. It's filled with some photographs. There's some awesome animal and plant facts. You will walk away with an expert on the ecosystem of Yellowstone National Park. This book is amazing. This is bringing back the wolves. So these are just 6 of the amazing nonfiction books that we have here at the library. So I encourage you to come out, check out one of these, or we can help you find another nonfiction book because we have way more than just these. And I will tell you this, an amazing nonfiction book can change your reading journey. I will tell you that. I can promise you that. So I hope you tune back next week. We have a whole new middle grade book spotlight, and I hope you have an amazing week.